remember that Prince of Egypt movie that came out in the probably mid-90s? It was pretty cool. It was by DreamWorks, and it was happening in the middle of the resurgence of the Disney animated classic-style films. In the middle, though, of that whole run, DreamWorks steps up to the table and takes a gigantic swing. In retrospect, I mean, think about this. They made a movie that was a very high risk to offend. You pick a topic that if you present it one way, you could offend everybody who feels empathetic toward Judaism. You frame it just slightly different, you could offend everybody who feels empathetic toward Protestantism. You frame it slightly differently, you offend everybody who feels empathetic toward Catholicism or Orthodoxy. And that is before you even get into how you might offend people who are of not belief or not a religious persuasion. And yet they did it anyway. Dang, I miss that kind of bravery. But there is one little bit of theology in there in particular that I've had a lot of conversations with people about over the years, and I've gotten a lot of different responses. And that's the main theme. It's the one that Mariah Carey did the pop version of. I don't remember who did the in-movie version of it, but it's the Miracles song. The "There can be miracles when you believe," or "if you believe," something like that. And it got me thinking, and continues to make me think, well, is that the prerequisite biblically for when miracles happen? Do they happen when people really, really believe, or do they happen when God wants to do it? And just by the way I framed that, you can tell what my persuasion is. I tend to see miracles in the Bible as being, one, incredibly rare, even by Bible standards. The odds of you standing around during the times in which the Bible describes and seeing a miracle happen, they're pretty rare, both chronologically and geographically. So one, they seem to be incredibly rare. Two, they seem to be incredibly poignant. They're always making an obvious theological point. And when the miracle happens in such a way that maybe isn't as immediately evident, the Bible authors seem to lump it into a group of miracles that do make a theological point. So how does that translate then to a theology of miracles biblically? Is it something that God does because God wants to, or is it something that God does because of how people are in the situation? Well, the people who would disagree with me would no doubt point to the end of Matthew chapter 13, which you and I looked at and discussed a while back, which is the one about Jesus finishes up teaching these parables. That's the kingdom parables. And then he moves on from there into chapter 13. And then people are like, isn't this Mary's kid? Like, this is kind of not that impressive. Where did he get all uppity like this? And they take offense at him. And then Jesus says only in his hometown is a prophet rejected or without honor. And then it says, and here's the smoking gun verse 59, and he did not do many miracles there because of their lack of faith. So for somebody who would sign off on the Mariah Carey theology of miracles, that verse would be a supporting text, and the passage we're looking at today would be a supporting text. And that's the implication I want to consider as we do probably a 2-day breakdown on this thing. So we're coming off the Mount of Transfiguration, and then just like when they came off the mountain from the Sermon on the Mount at the beginning of chapter 8, they run into people. And then it says, when they came to the crowd, which means right off the bat that a whole bunch of people were milling around waiting, and it wasn't like Jesus was off in the wilderness with people. A ton of people were there. And it says a man approached Jesus and knelt before him. So, we recognize this. This is what it looks like to assume the right posture before the king. Generally speaking, people who do this get it. Just one chapter back for me, it's just one flip of the page. You've got that Canaanite woman. Remember her? And she assumes a right position before the king, and Jesus recognizes that as part of her expression of faith. And so, okay, this guy does the same, and he says, Lord, have mercy on my son. Okay, so he believes that Jesus can do this, that he can resolve it. And he has seizures and is suffering greatly, and he often falls into the fire or into the water. Yee. I brought him to your disciples, but they couldn't heal him. Whew, a lot going on here. Okay, so the guy knows that Jesus, not the religious leaders, have the ability to do something about his kid's problem. That in itself is very telling in terms of where the whole conversation is going and who's winning and losing the war of popular opinion here. Now, it doesn't seem like Jesus is even playing the war of popular opinion, but it looks like it's swaying, at least up here in the north, toward him. And then we get this description of what the seizures are. And this is interesting because the guy doesn't say, my kid is demon possessed. The guy says he's got seizures. He convulses and clenches up and loses control of himself physically. And then he falls into the fire, which makes sense. I mean, that's how you're going to heat a home. We're talking about a place at higher elevation. This part of the north, I mean, there's skiing up around here. This is indeed around Caesarea Philippi or just up around Mount Hermon. I mean, it gets chilly up that direction. So you would have had some kind of fire pit, maybe even in the middle of a house. And think about that. If you're someone who deals with like full body seizures of some sort, that fire is going to be really problematic. And so this kid's going to drown or burn to death. And understandably, his dad is really concerned. But he describes the situation entirely medically. And he says, I brought him to your disciples, but they couldn't heal him. Well, why would you expect the disciples to be able to heal him? Well, I flip back over here to chapter 10, and you will recall Jesus calls out the 12 disciples, this inner circle, and he sends them out on this grand open world quest. And in doing so, he equips them with two things. One, this message that is the kingdom of heaven is near. And two is a little taste of the power that Jesus wields. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. So explicitly, right there in Matthew 10, verse 8, we know that at least at some point, the disciples have been given some kind of capacity to deal with the sort of problem that this dude at the bottom of the Mount of Transfiguration in Matthew 17 is seeing in his son. Did this power get somehow reversed or drawn back after the open world quest? I don't know. The text here seems to indicate that maybe the disciples were able to dabble in this kind of miraculous business from time to time along the way. I mean, certainly Peter did when he walked out onto the water. So, yeah, it's hard to say exactly how this works or what the conditions are under which such a miraculous demonstration might occur. But I mean, it would follow that if Jesus is fixing to hand off his authority to some degree here, hand off the torch or responsibility for the initiation of the kingdom or the building of the church to these guys, that if they were able to somehow demonstrate the same authority over nature, even in a reduced capacity that Jesus did, that would smack of the authority of Christ. Whereas if they immediately become reduced in power or access to the power of God, if they're immediately reduced to the level of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, maybe it undercuts their credibility. I really don't know. If it sounds like I'm doing the entirely speculative thing, it's because I'm doing the entirely speculative thing. It's difficult for me to connect the dots on all of this. I know some people hold much stronger opinions on these topics, and that's probably because their opinions are more informed, and it might be worth picking the brains of smarter people on that to see what they think about it. But Jesus' response to this is fascinating to me. He, instead of calling this a gesture of faith and getting all excited and saying like, oh, I haven't seen such faith in all of Israel like he did the last time he came off the mountain. Instead, he's like, unbelieving and perverse generation. What? I mean, the guy assumed the posture before the king. He knelt. And he's like, you have the ability to do this. I mean, even the phrase, Lord, have mercy, indicates that somehow he's in a position of such authority that he could demonstrate mercy over this, that resolving it would be an act of mercy on his kid, again, indicating his tremendous authority. But we get an asymmetry here as we duplicate a little bit the events of coming off the mountain from chapter 8. Sermon on the Mount ends. Jesus comes off the mountain. A guy with leprosy comes up to him. Jesus heals the guy. Then, and this is where I'm drawing the comparison, he gets toward Capernaum, and a centurion, a Gentile, comes out and is like, Lord, my servant lies at home, paralyzed, terrible suffering. Oh, sounds like the same thing. A healthy person is petitioning for the well-being of someone they love to Jesus. So it's a surrogate petitioner, and they're coming in faith in front of everybody. They don't care how dumb they look. And in the Matthew 8 account, coming off the mountain from the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is like, I'll go and heal him. And the centurion's like, you don't even need to, because I understand authority and you have it in greater doses than me. You can just do it. And then Jesus is like, I tell you the truth, I haven't found anyone in Israel with such great faith. And it goes beautifully and the healing happens. Again, chapter 15 with the Canaanite woman, same kind of deal. She's again petitioning on behalf of someone else, this time a daughter, for Jesus to intervene. Almost an identical situation because her daughter is plagued with demons, very much like the situation this guy coming off the Mount of Transfiguration, what he's dealing with over here in chapter 17. So given all of these similarities geographically in terms of the warm-up to the anecdote, you would expect the exact same response. I've never seen such great faith in all of Israel. Or Matthew 15:28 to the Canaanite woman, woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted. Instead of that, you get this, oh, unbelieving and perverse generation business. How long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy here to me. Okay, so the net result is going to be the same. Bring the kid to me and I will heal the kid. But how we get there has a very different flavor. It occurs to me that I set up this whole conversation around the question of miracles and how they work, and if there's something that's just prompted by God and that's that, and it doesn't matter what you do, or if somehow miracles are prompted to your belief or behavior, as Mariah Carey speculates in her song. But time being what it is, we're going to have to round out that thought in the next episode, which we will do. In the meantime, I noticed that a bunch of you have made your way over to africarenewal.org/TMBH to learn more about the idea of sponsoring a kid in Uganda. $40 a month will transform a kid's life. It helps meet needs in terms of education and healthcare and food, among other things. And I love that we have the opportunity as a little internet community here to try and do something that is overtly redemptive in the life of young people half a planet away. So thanks to those of you who have signed up for that. And thanks also to those of you who are kicking it around. And thanks to those of you who have different strategies for how you want to be redemptive. And this isn't one. That's cool too. Either way, we got more to figure out on this question of miracles as it relates to this passage, which we will do next time around. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.